Welcome to our channel. Get ready for a collection of incredible stories that will send shivers down your spine. If you love mystery and horror, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more thrilling content. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive into the stories. The same endless darkness awaited me outside. I couldn't see a thing, not my outstretched hand, not the neighboring building, not the bench near the entrance, not the bushes lining the sidewalk. Nothing. It was as if the world itself had been swallowed whole. Realizing I wouldn't find any answers out here, I turned back and shut the door behind me, locking it for good measure. As I made my way back to my room, a sound stopped me in my tracks. A single, sharp click. My heart dropped. Another click, closer this time. My skin prickled as a cold sweat broke over my body. Something, was watching me. I could feel it. I bolted. Running blindly, I crashed into walls and furniture, stumbling over myself in my desperation. I slammed my bedroom door shut, pressed my back against it, and slid to the floor, gasping for breath. Then, click. Right outside my door. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. A quiet knock. Then, the sound of something sharp, scraping against the wood. Open up. I know you're in there. The voice was deep, rasping, inhuman. I whimpered, retreating further into the room, curling up beside my bed. My whole body shook as if I'd been tossed into a blizzard, with nothing but thin rags to protect me. Then, open the fuck up. A violent bang. Then another. The door rattled under the force of heavy blows. The thing outside shrieked and howled, a grotesque mixture of rage, sorrow, and something else, something unearthly. I stayed like that until dawn, curled up in a ball, listening as the relentless pounding never once ceased. Whatever it was, it wanted in. It wanted me. And I couldn't even begin to imagine what would happen if it got through. But then, with the first light of morning, silence returned. Cautiously, I approached the door. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I stepped out and gasped. The door looked like a pack of wild animals had spent the night trying to tear it down. Deep gashes marred the surface, claw marks, scratches. Proof that something had been here. Still trembling, I stumbled into the kitchen. And then, behind me, click. I turned. And saw nothing. The same suffocating darkness. And then, I blacked out. Whatever it was, it tricked me. It fooled me and took my soul. When I stepped outside that night, I made one fatal mistake. I left the door open. That was all it needed. It took it as an invitation. That's why it couldn't enter my room, it needed permission. And that's also why it created illusions, distortions of reality, to make me believe in things that shouldn't and couldn't exist. And now? Now, I am alive. If you can even call it that. Colors are gone. The world is dull. Food has no taste, scents have no presence. Nothing brings me joy. No emotions, no feelings. I walk, I breathe, but I am not alive. To hell with this existence. Goodbye. P.S. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, never open the door. Never step outside. They say your home is your fortress, for a reason. I opened my eyes in the middle of the night. That never happens to me. Usually, when I go to bed, I sleep straight through until my alarm clock drags me back to reality. But this time, for some reason, I was staring into the darkness, fully awake. What woke me up? There was this strange feeling, an eerie sensation that something was wrong, like something had happened. But what? I reached out for my phone, which I always placed on the small nightstand beside my bed. The room was completely pitch black, not even a sliver of light. I pulled back the curtains, hoping the glow of the streetlights would seep in and break up the thick, suffocating darkness that sent chills crawling up my spine. It didn't. The world outside was just as dark as my apartment. I tried to unlock my phone. What the? I muttered when all my attempts failed. Weird. I was sure the battery was nearly full before I went to sleep. Maybe it crashed? Or just bugged out? Whatever. I got out of bed and walked to the light switch. Click. Nothing. I stepped out of my room and carefully navigated my way toward the kitchen, relying on memory and touch. The silence was oppressive. Normally, even in the dead of night, there were sounds, distant barking, the occasional car passing by, something. But not tonight. Tonight, there was nothing. Just darkness. Just silence. When I reached the kitchen, I grabbed the lighter I always kept on the counter. Click. Nothing. Not even a spark. I tried again. And again. No flame. I fumbled through the drawers, searching for a candle or matches, anything to break the suffocating darkness. But when I finally found them, the matches wouldn't ignite. No matter how many times I struck them, they simply wouldn't light, as if some unseen force was preventing it, like it wanted me to stay in the dark. Frustrated, I gave up and made my way to the front door. I figured I'd step outside, maybe get a sense of what was going on. The moment I opened the door, I saw the same thing I had inside, nothing. Just endless blackness. And silence so deep it felt like the world had ceased to exist. Oh, I forgot to mention, I live on the first floor. That detail matters. If I had lived even one floor higher, I might not have stepped out. Maybe I wouldn't be writing this now. But unfortunately, some things can't be undone. My gut was screaming at me to go back inside. No, not screaming, begging. Something wasn't right. But curiosity won over reason. I took a step outside. Then another. And another. Slowly, I descended the staircase leading to the main entrance. Standing before the heavy metal door, I hesitated for just a moment before pulling it open. And that was just one chilling tale, but we're not done yet. Get ready, because the next story might be even more terrifying. Consciousness was returning in fragments, reminding itself with rare flashes of light and scenes of unclear visions, whenever he managed to fully open his eyelids, mixed with images thrown at him by false memories. Reminding itself to whom? A good question. He didn't remember who he was. And did he ever know? Another good question. And did it even matter? Most likely, it did not. In those rare moments when his brain managed to function, when his consciousness awakened for fleeting fractions of a second, he understood, or rather, felt, only one thing: pain. Pain surrounded him. It wrapped around him like a heavy but soft blanket, pushing everything else into the background, everything that wasn't directly related to it. When he came to his senses, in those pitiful instants, besides pain, the surrounding world was populated by faces. Strange, incomprehensible faces. Faces that, in almost all his awakenings, were shouting something while their owners constantly touched and seemed to stroke him. He realized that much. But his sick mind didn't bother attempting to establish any cause-and-effect relationships with what was happening. And once again, he would sink into darkness. Alongside the shouts of the faces' owners, he could hear, or perhaps merely imagined, he couldn't tell, someone quietly sobbing nearby. And during those episodes when he managed to stay conscious a little longer, he faintly recognized some of the faces. Besides that, in his field of vision, or perhaps even more frequently, in his mind's eye, a red cross kept appearing. At first, pale and lacking clear contours, but gradually, it became sharper and more distinct, stirring vague associations. During his final awakening, which, judging by everything, had occurred after quite some time, since he was now surrounded by nighttime darkness, he managed to stay awake longer than before. Overcoming the excruciating headache, he barely opened his eyes, only for them to be immediately struck by the darkness, bringing his inflamed brain no less suffering than if it had been exposed to daylight. He instantly shut his eyelids again, unable to moan only because he lacked the strength to do so. Slowly, he started to think. Fortunately, this ability seemed to be returning to him, little by little. Remembering, or had it truly happened to him, the episodes of his previous awakenings, he began to rewind events backward, as far as his brain, still struggling for coherence, would allow. The shouts, the faces, their strange feature, only now did he understand what made them strange. They were only half faces, while the other half was hidden by something white. They blended in his tormented mind into a single entity, refusing to form a coherent picture. Or rather, there was a picture. A general picture. But it resembled a surrealistic painting, created in a feverish dream, composed of a whirlwind of painfully vivid colors, the faces, the countless hands waving in front of his eyes, the cries, the sobbing, and an inexplicable vibration that, despite its mystery, did not torment his brain any less. And, of course, the pain. It was omnipresent, it was both within him and around him. It felt as though it was the world that was being revealed to him with each flicker of consciousness. Just thinking about it made him moan weakly. This time, he had enough strength to do it. If before it had momentarily subsided, now it returned with its former intensity, as if angered by being forgotten. Lying still, allowing the pain to dull even slightly, he resumed his attempts to remember what had happened to him. The attempts were still unsuccessful. But this time, something flickered in his mind, something that, he vaguely felt, had significance. Something that explained things. Struggling to piece together the images that had visited him before, he couldn't focus on any one thing. The vision slipped away, escaping his grasp like tiny fish he used to pull from fishing nets as a child at the riverside dock, belonging to his grandfather. Wait. That was it. He had to hold on to this memory and push forward from there, he decided. His brain began working more actively. Encouraged by this, as much as he could be encouraged in his current state, he searched deeper into his mind. But his enthusiasm quickly faded. Despite the undeniable breakthrough of recalling the fishing memory, the recent events that had led him to where he was now remained elusive. Lying in the pitch darkness, his eyes slowly adjusting to it, he clung desperately to the fragments of visions that he still remembered, but which were already beginning to slip away. The sobbing, the shouts, the half-covered faces wrapped in something white. Something resembling. And then he saw it again. This time, clearly. Not with his mind's eye, as before, but directly in front of him. Yes, right in front of him. His eyes, now accustomed to the dark, distinguished it. The cross. Visible in the gloom directly opposite him. He could clearly see its outlines now. Though he could not discern its color in the darkness, he could swear it was red. It had to be red. Because it was an ordinary medical cross. And now, he was beginning to remember. Beginning to. But he wasn't given the chance to finish his thoughts. Silently, the door opened. And to his left, just a little further away, in the darkness, a vertical rectangle of dim light appeared, the light spilling in from the hospital corridor, where it had been turned on for the night. And standing in the doorway of the ward were two figures. Yes, now he really remembered. How could he not? The memories, as it turned out, were not buried too deep under the surface of his consciousness. They had only been waiting for him to grab onto something, in this case, the Red Cross playing the role of a lifeline, and start unraveling them, pulling them out one by one, scene by scene, each painfully vivid episode after another. He hadn't truly forgotten them, those images that he would later replay in his mind countless times. This time, the fish he had caught from the net was firmly clutched in his fingers. And it no longer tried to slip away. Now it became clear who he was. And what was actually happening. His name was Philip. He had recently turned 29 years old. And he worked as a paramedic. That day, when was it? Yesterday? The day before? Or much longer ago? Who could tell now? His team had taken a call in their usual rotation. Just a routine call. These happened often. A small village on the outskirts of their city. The caller, judging by her voice, an older woman, on the verge of panic, was pleading for an ambulance to be sent as soon as possible. She said her son had suddenly fallen ill and was now lying on the floor, drooling, mumbling something, unable to respond to her. When the dispatcher asked if her son had epilepsy, the woman lost her composure entirely, screaming that no, it was drugs. And then she started begging again for someone to come quickly. Just another domestic case. Not every day, of course, but Philip had already encountered such things before. And that was despite the fact that he was still practically a rookie. He hadn't even worked there a full year yet. Of course, in a situation like this, they needed to get there as fast as possible. Fortunately, their destination was only about 20 or 25 minutes away, since their garage was already located on the outskirts of the city. The real issue was that it was almost rush hour. The end of the workday. On top of that, the morning frost had left a thin layer of ice on the already wet roads, a fact they had already confirmed during previous calls. So for Anreich, their ambulance driver, the next 20 minutes promised to be quite an adventure. If, of course, they actually managed to get there in 20 minutes, instead of arriving 40 minutes later to a cold body. As they headed toward the village, with his colleagues joking about having to save another lost soul, Philip decided to take a nap. Or at least try. Yes, the time for it was short. But lately, tormented by worsening insomnia, he had been trying to snatch any opportunity for sleep, no matter how brief. And this time, surprisingly, he got lucky. Even before they reached the highway, he drifted off. So when, after an indeterminate amount of time, he was startled awake by shouting all around him, he didn't immediately grasp what was happening. But a miserable 2 seconds were enough for him to fully wake up, just in time to see the massive truck bearing down on them. He even managed to read the brand. ZIL, spelled out in iron letters on the radiator grille. And then, the memories that had returned to him first after regaining consciousness. The faces of the doctors. Some hidden behind medical masks. Some not. Andrich's face, somehow still conscious, standing on his own 2 feet. It seemed he had managed to swerve at the last moment, pulling them slightly to the side before impact. In the chaos, Philip had also glimpsed Violetta, their middle-aged paramedic. Thinking back later, he realized she had been sitting in the front passenger seat. And when they had barely avoided a head-on collision, she and the driver had been luckier than him. He had been seated in the back left, by the window. What had happened to the others, he didn't know. And he couldn't even clearly remember who else had been with them. Probably Anton, a guy his age, though unlike him, Anton had worked in emergency response for years. Or maybe it was Anastasia Denisovna, the senior paramedic on their team, who, despite her age, had actually worked there even less time than he had. No. He couldn't remember for sure. And that wasn't the most important thing right now. What mattered was figuring out who these 2 people were. They didn't look much like doctors. And in the few seconds they had stood motionless in the doorway, why? If they were doctors, why weren't they coming in? Philip had managed to make out what they were wearing. It looked utterly absurd in the current setting, where everyone should have been either in white coats or, like him, in hospital pajamas. But these 2 were wearing fishing overalls. Dear friends, thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this dive into the realm of the unknown, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and tap the notification bell so you won't miss the next video. More mysteries, more magic, and unexpected discoveries await. Together, we'll unravel every last enigma.